Not me.
You just raised your hand, Terry. It's too late. I'd really like someone on the committee to take notes, please.
Oh,
I'll do it, Kate, if you want me to. Then we'll share it afterwards.
Okay, Gladys, that would be fine. I'm not
I'm
getting any
sorry.
other bites, so.
Unless if Louisa want to do it, let her go ahead.
Kate, do you need me to? I'm not on the committee, but I will if nobody else can.
It doesn't look like I have any other volunteers here, so
I'm sorry, Kate.
I'll do them.
I
No
would
big
start.
deal.
Okay.
Yeah, either one, Gladys. I can do them if need be.
Can we just clarify who's going to do it? I just don't want to continue until we've got that pinned down, please.
I'll do it.
Okay. Gladys, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gladys.
Yeah. So
All right.
Teresa's here. Before you get started, I want
Mhm.
Teresa's here. Michelle is here. Kate is here. Juanita.
Juanita is out tonight. She's sick.
Oh, okay.
And Al Almeida is here.
So Al is here
Mhm.
and Louisa. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Gladys. So Kim, looks like we're doing Title IX first.
Yeah, so Kelly,
Would
do
you
you want?
take over, please?
Yep. Okay, so last time when we met, we talked about the draft Title IX policy, which we're ready to move into formal. I'm sorry, I actually edited the version. I filled in the blanks on it. That's not this version. I had access to a different document. So I just plugged in Danbury Board of Ed rather than blank Board of Ed. But if you've had a chance to read it, there's a lot of language in there that's really just required by law. And that's what this policy tracks, is all of the requirements that the law has for us to put in. So Kelly, if you can scroll down some. You'll see it tracks the language of Title IX, and it describes sex discrimination, what it is. And it describes both direct acts of sexual harassment, but also unwelcome conduct that may create a hostile work environment. Title VII, let's slow down just one little bit. Title VII there in Connecticut law basically track exactly the same thing. Title IX is the statute that goes with anyone receiving federal funds for education. Title VII is your general, the most well-known of the discrimination statutes, but they all prohibit the same kind of conduct, as does state law. It lays out the definition, again, very prescribed by the statute. And if you keep going, it starts to lay out that there shall be a policy that will describe how you will provide evidence of a claim of discrimination or observing discriminatory conduct. The nuts and bolts of this will be contained in the regulations, which we're working on now. The issue that we're struggling with right now that we'll continue to refine is, as we've written this policy, it names one Title IX coordinator. I think Kelly and I have talked about naming her role, that assistant superintendent, and Kelly's role as the alternative or assistant, because we're such a large district. You'll remember that there's two policies here. There's this one that pertains to students and the identical policy that pertains to employees. And so we're talking about a lot of people and a lot of potential claims. So we think that what we'll do in these regulations is we'll lay out a structure where all of our building administrators will be the people who are available to receive claims or reports of discrimination. And we will triage with those folks, with the chiefs and Kelly and myself, to make sure that we partner up so that anybody doing the investigation is not ultimately the decision maker under this policy. Again, another required component. And those pieces will be buried in the regulations. The reason why that's a really appropriate place for them is because this is an area of the law that changes frequently. I alluded to it the last time that we met, that depending on which administration is in Congress or in the White House, there are different standards that may come out about, for example, things like burdens of proof. So does someone have to prove, make an initial proof of harassment, and then there is a response, and then the plaintiff or the person raising the claim has to override that response. So those kinds of things are a little bit arcane, but they're good to put in regulations because they change frequently. So this policy gives you the skeleton. It's an important skeleton. There's not really any wiggle room for you to tweak it because it's all prescribed. So we would be looking for you to move through the, again, Title IX discrimination for students, which is the first one, and Title IX discrimination for employees. Two different ones.
Are there any questions from committee members? Teresa?
So, yeah, so I'm looking at what we have and compared to what you have here, it's
Mhm.
quite extensive. A big difference.
So the one on the screen is fleshing out all of what's required under these federal statutes now for us to provide notice to people in our district of what they do if they think they've been wronged.
So this is series 4000. It's
It-
just,
It was a
Um,
separate attachment, the Title IX policies. There were two separate addenda, two separate attachments. So it's
Right.
not included in that 4000 series.
so you also want us to do the 5000 as well tonight?
Mhm.
Approving that?
Just this one, just these two. I mean, these two are the same and they're new. I mean, they're newer to us because of the changes that go on in the law.
Yeah,
So-
so it's completely getting rid of what we had in the past and
Replacing.
accepting series 4000, accepting series 5000.
No, it's just, Kelly, I can't see what's on the screen, but it's just the two Title IX policies, which I think are gonna get numbered in, probably the students one will be in the student section, and the employees one will be in this personnel section of 4000s. So that's why you see that first one, Title IX Series 4000, that's the
Right.
employee one, and Title IX Series 5000 is the same exact policy, but it pertains to students, because students have a right of action for the same kind of behavior.
So,
So it's the only one that we skipped out of order because they're the same policy. So
Yes,
we're
ma'am.
gonna
To do them
file
too.
one in one section of the book and one in the other section of the book. Make sense?
Michelle?
Yeah, we just went through a whole bunch of pages and I'm just wondering, can you highlight what is different? I mean, I know that you're saying this is kind of like, there's no wiggle room and this is what's outlined that we have to kind of stick to, right? Is that what you're
I-
saying? This
Yeah, what's in this
pulling
one,
out of this information?
right, so what's in this one that we are presenting to you tonight is all of what the law requires that we put out as notice to people. So we're required to have a policy that names someone individually as the ombudsman or the coordinator. We're required to have reference to, where they're located, email addresses, that kind of thing. So those are all required components.
so you and Kelly will be
No, I'm going to remain as the Title IX coordinator, but there's a
Okay.
lot of places that recommend having supplements or other people who are also designees because of the size of our district and because there is a pretty strict prohibition that whoever does the investigation cannot also be the decision maker. So you may need more than one person. So we want to identify by role, not necessarily by Kim or Kelly, but by role, who will undertake that, if we step off the curb and get hit by a bus or something like that. And also we're going to, in the regulations, continue to even flesh that out more so that people know where to go if they have a concern.
Thank you.
Michelle?
Yeah, and it's not this policy, but I was reading a different policy that was about expulsions. And that there was privacy issues that were being brought up and that they were looking to assign someone and to remove Board of Ed members at that role due to, I thought, my understanding was this privacy, to kind of remove the Board of Ed member that doesn't have the clearance or it's a private issue. None of that would be pertained or applicable in this situation where it might be, sexual harassment or something that is personal of nature, like with the
Like
whoever your designee, the information, personal information that maybe there's
Right.
I'm just trying to ask if there's any kind of personal records or anything that the person in that situation may, want to make sure that they are have privacy or whatever the case is, I'm not,
So,
the word's
yeah.
not coming to mind, I'm sorry.
I think what you're asking is what happens if the person who thinks they have information to share, they have a claim, either doesn't want to come to the designee or doesn't want to put something in writing or doesn't want to be known to the person they're accusing? Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking all those kinds of questions, I guess. What are the what is the the
Where's the rest of the policy?
control? Yeah, like where are the guardrails, or where are there any guardrails? Are there any changes to that role that we should be considering as far as privacy issues? That's what I'm asking. I'm sorry, I'm
No, no.
hard time getting that out. Thank you.
So a lot of that is going to be in the regulations, which can
Okay.
always be changed, that the superintendent or the superintendent's designee promulgates regulations because they changed so much. But
Mm.
things that you're putting your finger on, Michelle, are exactly the same things that we talk about in the bullying context. We have very rigid policies about what to do if we get a complaint of bullying. Who do you talk to? Do you have to put the report in writing? How long do you have? Who do you show it to? Though all of those regulations are, we gave them to you in the first
Mhm.
first look. Those are the things that we'll continue to refine over time. So we'll continue to kind of tweak and push and pull and move those. And those are ones that can change at any time, but they don't require board vote because they're really not the policy. The policy is, you all need a foundational policy that this is the law and this is what we're doing to adhere to it. That's
Mm.
what these two policies do. The nuts and bolts of it are the things that we do in the regulations, just like we would with a bullying case or an expulsion case or something. So our guardrails mostly are set by law, by privacy laws like Freedom of Information Act, could be HIPAA, could be FERPA. So those all will set a lot of guardrails, but we'll also write them in our kind of manual because we want people to understand what's going to happen if they come forward.
Okay, and when is that? When do we discuss those in detail?
So
Or
you don't as a general rule. I mean, as a general rule, those are just the regulations. So every policy that we're looking at tonight and that we've been looking at this whole time, most of them will have regulations behind them, but we don't generally look at those because those regulations are promulgated by the superintendent just to set kind of basic operating procedures. So they
So,
come through the committee.
okay, so this is only on harassment, in specifically regarding harassment. Like, in other words, I'm looking to find out more of those details or how they would change. So when does that occur? Like literally talking about the changes to the policy, not this is what's mandated and we're gonna do that later. It just, when is later? Like for the details as to how,
Maybe if I could,
harassment is handled, or, because I remember you had mentioned it some time ago, maybe last year, about how that was going to work. Like if somebody was on the basketball court and they were, hit on the rear or something, was that an intentional? And so that's what I'm waiting to hear, what you've been working on as far as those regulations. When do we discuss that to make sure that we're in alignment, in alignment with that? No?
So we won't have, let me see if I can back up a little bit. So if we were to have a situation like what you just described, so somebody's out on the basketball court and has a run-in with a teacher, we wouldn't look to any regulations about whether you define that as harassment or not, right? That's sort of like, it's a fact pattern that we have to decide how we're going to respond to. Everyone's going to be different. Every fact is going to be different. The only guardrails we're going to have is, number one, there is a law that says that harassment based on gender is unlawful, and we have a basic policy that says that we're required to put out, and that person that happened to can see in that policy where they can go to raise a complaint. How we investigate, how we find the facts, how we who we talk to, what we decide based on those facts is we'll have general protocols like there shall be an investigation, you shall write a report, you shall share the report with someone else, but there won't be a world where we would sit as a group and talk about whether or not we have a policy against that kind of behavior on the basketball court. That's the fact pattern that we use our rules to decide how we're going to characterize it in the end. That's something that happens as a matter of course in an investigation, much like a DCF matter, similarly.
So then that fact pattern that that I guess I'm talking about, is it like, okay, there's been 1 or 2 or 3 incidences, there's nothing like that as far as written protocol where we would follow? That's what I'm looking to find out, is the details of
So,
our actions, or if somebody else has what can you expect? in
so
more
can I interrupt for a second? Because
Thank
we
you.
have a bunch of policies to go through in this meeting, and I certainly think, getting an answer to that is important, Michelle, but
Okay.
I don't know that this is the setting for that discussion.
Sounds good.
So I wonder if that might be something you could pick up with Kim, after the meeting.
Absolutely. I'll touch
Okay,
base on that, Kim, today or
thank
tomorrow.
you so much.
Thank you.
Terry, did you have another question?
Yes. Um, does this include allowing boys and girls sports?
Again, whether or not boys and girls sports runs afoul of Title IX is something a court decides, right? So that's how you all ended up being sued, because there were girls who filed a suit against Danbury Public Schools saying that your Title IX policy was violated because we let boys play on girls' teams. So you wouldn't have a policy per se that describes that scenario. You would have the basic policy saying we all agree out there that the federal law says you shall not discriminate. Whether that behavior violates that policy is a question of law that lawsuits are made of, and you're in one, or you were in one.
And I
Kim, I have,
also just want, Kim, when you clarify, when you list these series 4,000, can you put next to it personnel at 5,000 students? Just to clarify that there's a difference. I was confused at first. Then I noticed on the paperwork that it was personnel and students.
Yep.
If you could put students after the 5,000 to distinguish the series. Thank you.
Kim, I had a couple quick questions about these policies. The first is that I noticed that these were approved in 2022. Is that just the paperwork because it's the draft version or something of that nature? But I just want to make sure we're going to go with whatever's most current so we don't have to revisit this again anytime soon.
Yep.
And then the second question I had is when you were detailing sort of the additional folks that would have a role in investigations or in the process. Is there additional training and certification that has to go for those folks?
There's actually a lot of training. I think it's a mandatory couple-hour training. Kelly and I have been through it. All of your administrators have been through it recently. And I think it's an every other year requirement. So, there are some districts that actually pay stipends to folks to serve in this role. It can be pretty heavy. So I think, that's a really important point, that as we look to expand beyond just kind of the two of us, we need to make sure that those people are appropriately trained, and they have to provide evidence of training and that kind of thing. So it's pretty rigorous.
Okay, and I assume that would be managed through your office?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
In the initial
Thank you.
training, if I could just add, we actually brought in someone from Shipman and Goodwin to do the training who is an expert on this area of the law. So they did that training for our central office as well as our building administrative team.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, with that in mind, I guess I'm looking for a motion to make a recommendation to the board for a first read for both Title IX Series 4,000 for personnel and Title IX Series 5,000 for students. Teresa, you're
So
making the motion?
moved. Yes,
Thank you so
ma'am.
much. May I have a second, please? I need a second either from Michelle or Al, please.
I'll second it, Kate.
Thank you, Michelle.
Sure.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, motion so carries. Thank you very much. Kim, thank you for the overview. Appreciate it. All right, so we are moving on down to the second item on the agenda, which is Series 4,000 personnel. And Kelly, thank you again for putting this together. And I assume you'll be kicking off?
Yes, Kim and I will kind of tag team on these. So the 4,000 series is all personnel related. So this has to do with both certified and non-certified staff. And so you will see, I'm going to just jump down for a minute I received this question under security fingerprinting. This applies to both certified staff and non-certified staff, which is why you see the two different policy numbers. So anytime that a policy is going to apply to both groups, we'll double code it according with the CABE recommendations as one series. The one with the second digit being a 1 applies to certified. The one with the second digit being a 2 applies to non-certified. So I just want to bring that forward. The
Thank
first
you.
policy, yep. The first policy we'll go into is really the 4,000 policy. And essentially this outlines what the purpose and intent of our 4,000 series policies are. So it's called Concepts and Roles and Personnel. And you will see when you go through this policy that it's talking about our roles and responsibilities essentially related to personnel, recruiting, selecting, employing, retaining, training, compensating, evaluating staff in an appropriate way. It also talks about our responsibility to assign personnel to different positions according to their certification. And then also talking about our human relationships, right? How we, again, going along with recruiting and retaining, how we build relationships with the employees that are within our school district. So this is really just the kickoff, the 4,000 series that talks about every other policy to follow, which goes into more specific kind of finer details of personnel. I don't know if there's any questions. Really, I know everyone, I'm projecting on the screen just so everyone's aware, the recommended CABE policy. If we want to go back to the previous one, while there are some slight differences in it, there are not significant really in any policy we're going through tonight. Things are spelled out a little bit more detailed than some of our prior policies. But as far as the intent or purpose behind the policy, it still largely remains the same.
Is it possible, or is it too much to highlight what's new as opposed, versus what is already there, just to see the difference?
The reason I've done the side by side, I can for certain policies. Some are rewritten kind of in their entirety. So to go for a word comparison is a little bit challenging. If there's a sentence or something inserted in, that's certainly something we can do. But the reason I provide the old and new with the hyperlinks, I think it's probably best if you put them side by side and read one following the other. But this, again, the purpose of this is to bring our Series 4,000 policies up to date with the most current legal references at the end and CABE recommended language that's really more specific to 2024.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big difference here, but it's almost 25 years since this policy has been revised. So, I think, Kelly, to your point, some of these are the language and the way it's even presented is going to change substantially.
I mean, I just switched back to the previous one. I think what you will see, Terry, is the 1 through 6 that they numbered and bullet pointed out to each specific thing is where the chunk of kind of the update or recommendations are here, but essentially it says the same thing. It's just more detailed in the new policy. But to go word by word, there's so many differences, it makes it a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, it's challenging to try to keep up. What's the difference too? I realize it's a lot there. It's just that it is challenging either way you look at it.
So Kate, I will take your recommendation. If we want to go to the original policy, have everyone read it and then project the new policy, we can do that. That's also why we're providing the links and information in advance as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, to that point, Kelly, that was something we talked about at the last meeting, how important it is for folks to have shown up having read through these. I think there certainly might be cases where we should consider it, line by line and kind of go over it. I don't know if this is one of them because it's essentially the same content. It's just a little bit more the language is a little bit more expanded. If folks really feel strongly about it, then we can do it.
I do feel strongly about it because language is important and how it's, understood. And I thought that when we had spoken, you know, over the course of the last couple of years, we were talking about how heavy this load is going to be, but that we were going to show what the differences were. And so I agree with Teresa. I mean, I understand there's a lot of policy here, and you really have to be well versed and understand how you're looking at it. And that is what I would be looking to you to explain to me how the policy has changed over 25 years. There's going to be significant changes and then some that are slight. But I would like to review those in more detail.
So,
If
I
I
mean,
guess,
I'm just trying to think practically how we would do that, because if you, Kelly, if you go back to the first screen, you know, a lot of times what we'll do, like when we bargain in contracts and you get a red line version, so we almost couldn't red line version this because it would be all crossed off with new sentences stuck in the middle that are just re-saying the same thing in a different way. I think in these overview ones like this one, this is like the feel good HR policy, right? The one that they wrote 30 years ago, like, we love everybody, we take care. That's what this policy is. Those that might create a burden, like the one I'm thinking most of is that hiring policy with the different panels. If we were going to suggest a change, like, we don't want to do 2 panels anymore, we want to do 1 panel, that would be one where it'd be super easy to show you on a red line version. We could talk about what, you know, what the difference is, what the impact on, you know, nepotism or whatever it is might be. But I think in ones like this one, I think you just look at, your eyes would glaze over because you just have a big blob of everything crossed out and all new words, and they all are that like feel good, happy words, if that makes any sense. That's my 2 cents on this one in particular.
I guess I'm talking about the ones that do change, that there's been significant changes in the last 25 years of how HR looks at, right, policy. So if there's like significant changes where we're not talking about one word that doesn't change the meaning of it. You know what I'm saying? Where that's what I'm talking about. Like, where the big changes are the ones that we need to highlight, or, hey, you know what, this was the case, but now, you know, we've included this. So now it includes this larger pool of people, like those kinds of changes. Are we going to go over that? Okay, great.
We can answer
Yeah,
any
I don't think
questions you have about these policies. I just highlighted on the screen for you the spelling out. While there are differences in the language written between the former policy and the current policy in, you know, minor wording changes, the significant difference here is your 1 through 6, the numbers 1 through 6, which are highlighted on the screen, which really spells out the, you know, the 6 different chunks or roles and responsibilities of the policies to come. So again, the first one is recruitment, selection, and employing the highest qualified personnel. The second one is compensation. The third one talks about in-service or training. The fourth one about evaluation. The fifth one about assignments. And you will see policies that align to each one of these in the latter part of the series. And the last one talking about human relationships. And that is kind of embedded within all the policies in this series and others. But that is where the meat of this policy has kind of spelled out different responsibilities in relationship to personnel.
May I, Kate?
Mhm.
If I look at the first one, it says to recruit and select and employ the best qualified. Now we have a program, or we're looking to hire diversity, you know, so the best qualified, like that would be a word in there where it's saying the best qualified. And I understand that we always look for the best qualified, but we have other, you know.
So Michelle, I'm going to interject for a second. You have a policy that's coming up that talks specifically about recruitment of minority candidates. So
Okay,
this
so that-
policy outlines, like, this is like the 5,000 foot view, and
Okay.
then the rest of the policies are all the, you know, so there is a policy that addresses exactly what you're talking
Okay. All right. So okay, great. So the fact that it's not here, we will be seeing that.
about. We'll be seeing it. Yes,
Thank
there's a
you.
whole policy devoted just to that topic.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, Kate.
No problem. Any questions from, any other questions from committee members?
Thank you, Kelly, for doing that. Yeah, showing the difference. That helps. Thank you.
Of
All right,
course.
I'm gonna look for a motion to recommend the
4,000.
number 4,000 policy for
Or
first
do you-
read to the
Do you want to wait until we do them all and just do a motion to those first,
I want
4,000?
I want to do them one by one, Terry, just because if we do bump into one that we decide we don't want to send for a first read yet, or that requires more,
Okay, I
um,
make the motion.
thank you. May I have a second, please?
Okay, Kate, I'll second.
Thank you, Michelle. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Motion carries. All right, so we're looking at policy 4111, recruitment and selection.
Yes, sorry to change screens. It's just quicker to unshare and then reshare. So here you go. The next policy, again, this is the CABE recommended policy, talking about personnel. This policy, again, will be signified by a 4111 and a 4211 because it's both certified and non-certified. So you will see that on the recommendation if you choose to send this to the full board. So here it is talking about how we recruit and select staff members for the positions that we have within the district. I don't,
If
you
you
want-
go up just a little bit, you just scrolled past the diversity part.
can you see it now, Kate, Kim?
Yep. So remember this policy, particularly that belief in ensuring increasing educator diversity, those all dovetail with the strategic plan, with the increasing educator diversity plan that you're going to see at your board meeting Wednesday night that will go to the commissioner, to the grant. So all of these pieces are all intertwined. And so this is sort of the bedrock in the policies piece from which these other things are going to flow out.
Hey, I'm not sure if you want to entertain, I know everyone had this information in advance. We can certainly go through it or answer any questions related to the policy as written. You let us know.
Just a second here, sorry.
Okay.
So, with regard to the content about hiring of retired teachers, Kim, could you talk just a little bit about that so we can kind of understand? The language is a little complicated.
Sure. So basically the language there is just tracking what are our requirements with the Teachers Retirement Board. So when a teacher retires from service, and there's lots of rules about when it's considered early retirement, late, regular retirement, on time, disability related, all of those rules are set by the Teachers Retirement Board, which is a state organization. They hold the pension plan and they make the guard rules or the guidelines. So if a teacher, and when a teacher retires, there's some circumstances where they may come back and teach again with us, this time as a retired teacher. So more like a sub. And they basically will continue to collect their pension while also subbing for us. In order to restrict that double dipping idea, the regulations have long had this 45% rule, which means that the teacher, the retired teacher, cannot earn any more than 45% of the highest someone could be paid in that position, including, if they take benefits, the value of the benefit plan. So those are state-run rules that, again, set the parameters. This policy really just follows the big boulders here. It lays out the big boulders of what can be some sort of arcane rules. Some of those rules got suspended after COVID. Some of them are laxed because of shortage areas. So it's a whole world unto itself on how to navigate the TRB rules in order to get someone to come in and work with us as a retired teacher. So this starts to really lay it out. But at the end of the day, a lot of this we defer to TRB to be able to tell the teacher what the rules are.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Teresa, did you have a question?
You have a listing, I guess, listing all the legal references and stuff towards the bottom. Is there any way that you can separate that from the body of the policy? Just to delineate, I'm looking at, I'm thinking, or is this more policy down here? But it's like your bibliography, or what do you call it? Not
Yeah,
bibli-
that's exactly, it's the required references. That's right.
Yeah, right. If you could just kind of
Put an asterisk.
separate or a lot or a broken line or something across, just to show that it's separate from your policy.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then that, the line that's stricken out, that's alternative language. So, because of our size, you delegate the authority for hiring all of the teachers to the superintendent here. Because if you were, a much smaller district like Sherman, where you have 10 teachers, you might go through the process and nominate individuals to be teachers, and you all would vote on each one of them. With the volume of people that we do in a given year, you'd spend all your time doing that. So you delegate that to the superintendent and his team in order to go ahead and employ teachers. So that language in parentheses is if you didn't do that, what you would have to do. And the board would have to accept or reject people within 35 calendar days. So it's really, it's alternative language from CABE.
So do we need it?
Nope,
Because
that's
it's
why
not.
That's why
That's
it's crossed out.
Okay, but we don't need it then, but it's not crossed out on our copy.
Oh,
You
it's
will-
crossed out on the one you're looking at. Yep, on the screen.
So it should be that way on the screen.
Correct.
Mhm.
And what we
Alright.
would do is if you decided to move this forward, we would remove it. So there was a clean policy. Kim and I were just trying to show you that that was an alteration or adjustment because it was in the recommended policy for consideration that we didn't want to remove it without.
Right, right. You had it in parentheses. I just want to make sure I remember.
There's one on the fingerprinting we'll go over as well. The same thing.
Okay. Any other questions from committee members about this policy? All right, seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to make a recommendation to the full board for first reading of policy 4111, revised policy 4111, recruitment and selection. And that will also be for, nope, just that one, sorry, 4111.
So
I'll
moved.
motion. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry, and Michelle will go get the second on that. So all
Yes.
those in favor, please signify
Aye.
by saying aye.
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 Where's
Motion
Al?
carries.
Where's Gladys?
Gladys is an ex officio member of
Oh,
the committee, so,
so,
or not ex officio, what's a,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
ex officio. Yeah,
so she does not
Wow.
participate in the voting.
okay.
okay.
But Mrs. Cooper, I trust that if you have any questions or concerns, you're invited to speak freely in this meeting as
Yeah,
well.
thank you. I'm reading as we go along. Yes.
Thank you. All right, moving on to 4112.4.
So this one's had a lot of evolution over time. To be very honest, we don't use a lot of health examinations anymore. We use them in places where they're strictly job related. So, you'll see there's a couple of things that are optional in here, like the TB test. That's just a holdover from a very, very long time ago that's no longer required. So I think it's up to you. My recommendation would be that you leave in a permissive part of this procedure, because you do want to be able to use it in places where it's strictly job related. If you started doing widely spread health examinations for topics or functions that are not job related, that's when you expose yourself to claims about disability discrimination or perceived disability. So we generally don't like to go too close to those. I don't know if anyone's got any questions about this one. This lays out the procedures were you to use the physical exam policy because of it being job related.
Okay. For that language that's marked optional, all new staff with a risk for having latent TB infection. Can you give us some guidance there, please, Kim?
Again, I worry a little about perceived disabilities, honestly. And so I don't think if it is to the extent that it's optional that we don't need it, that's when I'm not sure you really would
So
have any.
don't need it, so take it out.
Take it out.
Around 100 million years, I think people get emotionally affected.
Well, listen, they got measles coming back.
They do. They do.
I was shocked.
And you know, those of us that got that shot when we were quite young, it doesn't work so good anymore, I don't think.
Shot. I had the measles. That's how
Oh,
long.
Lord.
Anyway,
Uh,
Are there
Uh,
any about striking through that, that sentence in the policy?
okay.
Are there any other questions from committee members here? So Kim, you feel confident that in removing that optional language, that the rest of this is pretty broad enough to
yeah, and it's
avoid any kind of,
Yep. And I think it's available to us in the event that we think it's job related and we need to put people through the process.
all right. Seeing no other questions or comments, I will ask for a motion to make a recommendation to the full board for a first read on policy 4112.4, health examination.
Michelle, you want to do it?
Motion. I'll move.
Second.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Terry. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion so carries. All right, we are moving on down to 4112.5 / 4212.5.
Very favorite topic, fingerprinting.
So this has to do with fingerprinting. So allowing us to do both background checks, so fingerprinting, criminal background checks, and DCF checks. And this is a policy which applies both to your certified and non-certified staff. The purpose behind this is to make sure that there are nothing that we should be aware of coming into employment, and really to protect our children. To make sure that those employees that we are hiring do not have any concerns that they present to employment in our schools.
Are there questions from committee members here?
Uh,
Go ahead, Terry.
the old copy, I kind of liked the way it's formatted with one section. Can you do that in this area to because it kind of runs all in together?
Can you be a little bit more explicit on which part that you liked in the former policy?
Well, like it says here, number 1, prior to the first day of employment, after the superintendent or designee. Then number 2, no later than 10 calendar days. Can you do that with this one? Because this just kind of runs into one another. You know, it's separate, the paragraphs, but delineating it, would that be a lot easier? So you know to do 1, you know to do 2, you know to do 3.
We can certainly do that. Terry, can I just ask right here? So I'm on the paragraph that's applicants as required shall make disclosures. Are you thinking here to kind of tab them all in so you have number 1, 2, and 3 very clearly labeled, or to use the wording of the former policy?
Well, no, not use the wording of the former policy, just setting it up. The former policy, you have it, you know, different. Paragraph 1 to do this, paragraph 2 to do that, paragraph 3 to do this. You have it in the old policy.
Let me just present it just so everyone knows what you are referring to.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah, I
that's
just, this one has just you've got a lot of paragraphs here.
Remember, this is the CABE recommended that we
Right.
decided to go with.
So Kelly, while you're pulling that up, I'll say this is all statutorily required. So we are required in Connecticut to do the fingerprint check through state and federal authorities. We're required to do the DCF check. So people have to complete the form and we have to submit that to see if they're on the registry. And the third thing it makes reference there without calling it explicitly by name is the employer verification. So any applicant who is going to be considered for a job who has worked in a position in the past working with students, they have to give us the name and address, and we send those employers a form, and it asks if anyone, if there were any pending allegations of abuse or neglect at the time that the person left employment, if there had been any finding of abuse, neglect, and we often will have to chase down employers because someone could give you 8 or 10 of those forms, right? From all different employers that they've had where they work with kids. So we run all of those down. Sometimes it takes more, I'm going to land the plane here. Sometimes it takes more than 5 or 10 days. And so I get a little nervous with date restrictions because we try to make sure that we've complied with the lion's share of them before putting anybody in the classroom as required by law. But some of those, like the EEV forms, take a while and we don't always get them all back.
I just put up the previous policy as Kim was talking, just so you can see how it's numbered 1 through 5. Certainly, we can try to outline the process and the steps, like the 1, 2, 3 that are in 2 of the different paragraphs. We can certainly,
Yeah,
you know,
just to make it, yeah.
so that it's
clear.
a little bit clearer and easier on the eyes to read. But I would recommend going with the paragraphs as written in front of you.
Oh, yeah, if you can just, yeah, organize it, I think would help.
We can go ahead and do that, absolutely.
Okay, any questions or thoughts from committee members about this policy? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to make a recommendation to the board for the full board for a first read on policy 4112.5 and 4212.5 for security check fingerprinting for personnel certified and non-certified.
Motion.
Moved
Second,
by Michelle, second by Terry. May all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
aye.
Aye. Motion so carries. Thank you. Now, can I just ask a quick question to either Kelly or Kim? I'm not sure who is the best person to answer this. In looking at the policies, I see there's 4111.1, which we did skip over. I assume it's because it's actually supposed to be 4211.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to
Yeah, as
clarify
we're
that.
going through, we're trying to put them in order. There were some discrepancies from the audit, and I'll actually speak to that for not this policy, but the next one that we do, as I do need to double check on the correct numbering.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Appreciate you confirming.
So
All
the
right,
next,
so go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead, Kate.
No, go ahead. Sorry, Kelly.
That's okay. We were both going to say the same thing, I think. The next one is 4112.6, which is personnel records. Essentially, this states that in central office, we are to keep a personnel file on employees, on each employee that is employed by the board, that the employee has the right to review that personnel file. And then, and Kim, I'm going to ask for you to describe this, but in limited capacities, we do have the right to release information contained within the personnel file pursuant with a FOIA request. And then there's some specific steps that we go through in order to do that.
So just to scroll up a teeny bit, the place where I actually recommend striking out. So a personnel file is not a location. It's a series of documents. So a personnel file for Kelly might have her evaluations that are located in an electronic format somewhere. They may have a performance related memoranda that was written and printed out and filed in her file. It may be contained in the superintendent's desk in a file. So there is no legal personnel file location where if something's not in it, it's not in the personnel file, if that makes sense. So again, to kind of use the words of Mr. Mooney, the personnel file is not a single location. It's a series of documents. And so when we get a request for one, our obligation is to gather all of those documents and produce them as anything affecting the terms and conditions of employment. So I do think that that one sentence there is a little bit misleading, which is why I sort of struck it out of the recommended policy. The other is, I just think it's a good policy for you everywhere that we can to have a superintendent or designee. Again, you have an awful lot of employees. So if you have 1,800 employees and you get 10 requests for personnel files, I don't think you want to funnel those all through one person. It's just too much work. So that's why I recommended that you put in or designee in all the places where they are relevant. This policy really is just tracking FOIA requirements. So as Kelly alluded, contrary to popular belief, there's not a whole lot that is shielded from disclosure from teachers' personnel files. Lots of things that they do, certain parts of evaluations, but not discipline, are all subject to disclosure if someone were to make a Freedom of Information Act request. So I think that this policy as proposed tries to kind of thread the needle a little bit between what would be required to be disclosed on request. It's also an important policy because it alerts employees that it is very much within their rights to ask for a copy of their file. And we do get that a lot. People will say, can I see everything that's in my file? So that could be memos that Kelly's written. It could be memos that were stuck in at the time of hire into that, demographic file. It could be any of those things. So I think people need to have a right to understand that they can ask to see their file. And many do.
Teresa?
You added designee, it's not in the copy we got.
Right. I added that actually while I was sitting here this afternoon looking at it again.
Fine, it's okay with me. I didn't have it here.
I was looking at it again today, so I thought that was probably an appropriate change.
I agree. I agree.
Any questions from committee members about this policy? All right, seeing none, I will look for a motion to make a recommendation to the full board for a first reading of policy 4112.6, personnel records. Al, want to jump in?
I'll move.
Thank you, Michelle.
Second.
Thank you, Terry. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion so carries.
Okay, so the next one, I do want to start, Terry, thank you for asking. This one is labeled in your agenda as, I think, on one section 4113 and on another 4114. This is one that between what's posted on our Danbury Public Schools website, what's on the CAVE website, there's a difference. So I do want to get back to the committee on the numbering of it, but I can assure you that the content of it is appropriate. And so I would encourage that we move forward with it tonight. And at the next policy meeting, Kim and I can just let you know, is this 4113 or 4114? I do want to verify that. This really is talking about assignment and transfer. It is a brief policy of personnel, and this is for certified staff members. And so within this policy, it references as negotiated in your collective bargaining agreement, and part of our teachers' contract is a provision for transfers that a teacher can request. And there's dates and timelines for that. So that is spelled out in your teacher's contract, but this policy essentially alerts teachers very similarly to the personnel records that you have a right to ask for a transfer within your area of certification. And there's a process for doing that. I don't know, Kim, if you want to add anything.
No, and that's in that first paragraph, you see consistent with any existing provisions in negotiated agreements. That's what it's referring to. So teachers in their contract, after many rounds of negotiations, what the way the system works is they can, prior to March 1st, request a transfer, and they will give you, for example, it could be I would like any elementary school, or only if you have something in Great Plain, or only if you have something in 3rd grade. And those parameters go onto a list. Now, it doesn't guarantee by operation of the contract, you're not guaranteed the transfer. It means that you are guaranteed an interview with the receiving building administrator. So, and I don't get a lot of these anymore. It also, if someone were a teacher and were to not have requested to transfer, but saw a posting for that third grade job at Great Plain, they're certainly free to apply as an internal candidate. So it's kind of diluted down the transfer provisions a little bit, in that everybody kind of has an opportunity, whether they've said it by March 1st or not, everybody gets a chance to kind of vie for a position. They just may not be guaranteed an interview if they haven't put their name on the list.
So Kim, this was, this particular, or Kelly, this particular policy was broken down into two distinct segments on our original, information. One, which was, I guess, just general to everybody in the district, and then one specific to administrative assignments, for, it looks like administrators specifically, like, principals.
And again, I think that may go back to way back in the day, administrators and teachers were in the same contract.
Okay.
So now over time, before my time, I don't know when it was exactly, but I don't think it was shortly before I arrived. They split off into two different bargaining units. So I think what you're seeing is a kind of a holdover of trying to peel apart those policies to make sure that
Gotcha.
all groups go to their designated contract first.
Which makes sense. It's a lot cleaner to do it that way.
And I just,
Terry? Oh, sorry.
I'm
No,
sorry,
Kelly.
Kelly. Go
no, I
ahead.
was just gonna say, I just put up for your reference so everyone could see what you were referring to. And just to call everyone's attention, this was last reviewed in October of '99. So it was prior to the administrative union breaking off, as Kim has indicated. Go
Terry?
ahead.
I noticed that the letter R is in front of these numbers. Are we going to keep, I assume that means revised. Do we keep that or no? Get the letter when we revise these policies
The R is the regulation.
or regulation?
And the
Oh,
P is up
okay.
above the policy. So the P, yeah. So
Whereas-
that one's the policy, and then below it is the regulation with the R.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I try to get this all
It
straight.
used to be, this is, for me, it's a little bit of an adjustment too, because what it used to be is in that 3-ring binder, which is, I still think the best way to go, in that 3-ring binder, that I think one was blue and then the regulations were green and they were pieces of paper right behind them. So it was a little bit easier conceptually just to think about it as a separate thing.
Right. Thank you.
Any questions or concerns from committee members? All right, seeing none, I will ask for a motion to make a recommendation to full board for a first reading of policy 4114 assignment.
Move.
Moved by Michelle, thank you.
Second,
Seconded by Terry, thank you both. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. Before we, you're going to give us a preview, Kelly. Before we do that, I just want to give any board members who are on this call with us that are not committee members a chance if they have any questions or concerns about the policies we discussed this evening. All right, Kelly, it looks like we can move forward. Thank you.
And
Oh,
I
Terry,
just,
did you?
I just want
did
to
you have
say
some-
thank you, Gladys, because I really didn't want to take minutes because I wanted to review the policies, and thank you so much. That's all.
You're welcome. No problem.
I second that.
Just a little bit of a preview. Here you will see listed policies for next meeting. And right now, just because I wanted you to focus on the ones we are going over tonight, it's just linked the old policy or our current policy that's in place. What I will do is you will see it populated on the next agenda where we'll create the link to the CAPE recommended policy for your consideration. And you will see that we have 11 more to do. So 11 more policies. These are required policies from our CABE audit. Again, they're all policies we currently have, but it's bringing them up into current language. So our recommendation would be that we go through some or all of, I can make the agenda to have all 11 policies, and certainly depending on the conversation and timing, we can certainly agree to postpone some for the next meeting if needed.
I think Kate did it, got this going. I'm looking at the time. We did okay, I think.
I think we did very well, actually.
Yeah, I think put it all on for the next meeting. That's my feeling. I don't, unless somebody else doesn't want to do it, but
I'm okay with that as, as long as we go into the new areas, right? We're gonna go
Yep.
into those thoroughly, so yeah, I'm fine with whatever you'd like, Kate and Al.
Yeah, I'm okay with having them all on there, Kelly. I mean, I think worst case scenario, we get to a point where we've spent a fair amount of time in the meeting and we decide we're going to table some of those for the following meetings. So
And then not on here, but just so you know, there are some for consideration policies. So what Kim and I will do for not the next meeting, but the following meeting is bring to your attention, there are 17 in this series alone that are for consideration, most of which fall under current state law and statute that we have to do anyways. But if there are ones for this committee to look at or consider, they're all outlined in the original audit for you to just look at. But then we will also bring those forward, I think, for the following meeting. So that would wrap up the series 4,000. The next series we would move on to is 5,000, which is students, some of which are student records.
excellent. I appreciate you guys continuing to push us through, push this boulder up the hill.
And thank you all.
For your time.
All right, any comments or concerns from anybody on the call here before we wrap up? All right, I'm gonna call for a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion?
Thank you, Teresa. Yep,
second.
second by
Oh,
Michelle.
okay.
Thank you so much.
you.
All those in favor, please signify